What defines Seto Kaiba? His blue eyes white dragon? His innovations in technology? His dueling style? His rivalry with Yugi? The truth is there are several factors which contribute to this character, but let's discuss how he was perfected in Dark Side of Dimensions. So for those who don't know, Dark Side of Dimensions is a continuation of the manga, not the anime. Now this is important for Kaiba's character, because at the end of the anime, Kaiba calls Yugi the king of games, which realistically he would never do. There's also another important difference between the anime and manga, as in the anime, there's a filler arc called Waking the Dragons, in which Yugi loses his title of the king of games to Raphael. It's obvious that the Kaiba we see in Dark Side of Dimensions is the one from the manga, because he is simply obsessed with regaining his title as the king of games. He even recreates every detail of the Pharaoh in his deck, including his perfectly coiffed hair, which is actually the part that took the longest. But Kaiba doesn't just want to beat the Pharaoh, he wants a perfect victory to prove that he is the ultimate duelist and the king of games. And I think it's established quite early on that Kaiba is a perfectionist. This is also displayed in quite a funny scene where Kaiba, out of anger, crushes a water bottle and then seeks to fire whoever made the bottle because it's too weak. And in his own words, Kaiba Corp products shouldn't bend that easily. This is a short scene, but it's very effective. It shows that Kaiba's character is very extreme, and it really reinforces that perfectionist mentality. It's also interesting that Kaiba is the one that wants to bring back the Pharaoh in this movie, not Yugi. This is because Yugi's reached a point of acceptance, and he realizes that the Pharaoh is not meant to exist in this time, and the movie displays that although it's difficult for Yugi to deal with this, he is trying to move on in a healthier way, and Kaiba is holding a grudge so strong that he is refusing to let it go. An interesting point is that Kaiba doesn't care about dueling Yugi, he only duels him as a means to bring the Pharaoh back. This shows that Kaiba never really respected Yugi as a duelist, which brings us back to the moment at the end of the anime where Kaiba called Yugi the king of games, which shows why this is so out of character. But now, let's talk about one of my favorite scenes from the movie. This is where Aigami confronts Kaiba, who is in possession of the quantum cube which has been making people disappear all over the world. Now the power of the quantum cube is said to send people to another dimension. Now that might sound familiar because it's basically the Shadow Realm. So you might think when Kaiba comes up against an unstoppable force that's been sending people to a different dimension, he would be powerless. But this is Seto Kaiba. As he's about to vanish, he just stares back at Aigami. So then he throws on his duel disc and fills the room with a blue light. And Aigami can only stand in disbelief at what he's just seen. And then Kaiba tells him there are no limits when you're as brilliant as Seto Kaiba. This shows another core element of Kaiba's character, that being arrogance, as he truly believes he can overcome any obstacle, and he truly believes that there are no limits for him. And to be fair to him, it's hard to argue against it, since he's literally just done something that was considered impossible. And the craziest part is this is only the beginning. Since Aigami failed to assimilate him into the quantum cube, he decides to duel Kaiba. And Kaiba starts to lose the duel. His back's against the wall, and he starts thinking about how he can't lose now. And then he thinks about how close he was to reviving the Pharaoh. And then he sees a vision of the Pharaoh, and says to himself that he will duel him again. And this just shows how strong his desire for revenge is against the Pharaoh. It pushes him forward so much that he's literally able to overcome impossible odds. And with the sheer force of his desires, he slams his hand into the ground and summons the god card, Obelisk the Tormentor. And once again, does something that should be impossible. He summoned one of the 3 Egyptian god cards, which were sealed away with the Pharaoh. Now I'm not sure exactly how this is done, because there's not really an explanation for it. But since they are in the Pharaoh's tomb, it's possible that the god cards are still there somewhere, and somehow Kaiba was able to bring out Obelisk the Tormentor, and maybe it's to do with the fact that he's actually used this card before. But either way, Aigami is absolutely shocked and can't believe his eyes. Kaiba then activates Obelisk's ability, and Aigami says, "But your monster can't use its abilities," which prompts Kaiba to respond with, "It's no monster, it's a god." And after Aigami faces the power of Obelisk, he gets up and says, "I'm still standing," but Kaiba doesn't even care. Mokuba gets the attention of both duelists as he starts flying away with pieces of the Millennium Puzzle. And after Aigami snatches 2 pieces of the Millennium Puzzle, Kaiba just jumps in his Blue Eyes White Dragon jet and leaves. Although it's unclear if Kaiba knows that he took 2 pieces of the Millennium Puzzle, but he'll come back for them later anyway. And he says to Aigami, "To be continued." This is just another moment that shows Kaiba's only focused on one goal. He just wants to duel the Pharaoh. He doesn't like doing things that waste his time or don't help him get closer to his goal. And it seems like nothing else will fulfill him. There's no other achievement that will make him satisfied. So at some point, Kaiba discovers that 2 pieces of the Millennium Puzzle have been taken by Aigami. So he tracks him down and asks him calmly if he can have the pieces back. Oh no, wait, that's not what he did. He takes 3 helicopters with 6 armored guards to put a high-tech blindfold on Aigami's face. This is just another way of showing that Kaiba gets what he wants. And this is a big part of his character because of how he gets what he wants. Think back to Duelist Kingdom. He knew he had to duel Pegasus to save his brother, and he would get there by any means necessary. And because he knows Yugi so well, he knew that he could prey on his good nature. And speaking of Yugi, in the next scene, Kaiba reveals that he knows Yugi kept a piece of the Millennium Puzzle, and Yugi is confused as to how Kaiba even knows he kept it, and Kaiba simply responds with, "I know everything that goes on in Domino." And this does make me wonder, how does Kaiba even find out about this stuff? I believe that if Kaiba needs information for something to reach a goal of his, he will get it. When Mokuba is interrogating Aigami about how to get the puzzle piece out of the cube, Aigami says to him it doesn't even matter if you get the piece out of the cube, because the second piece is somewhere else. Clearly Aigami doesn't know that Kaiba knows everything that goes on in Domino, and he already knows where the second piece is. Shortly after this, Kaiba does a demonstration of his new duel disc, and to show how realistic his holograms are, he shoots down a plane and has it land in the stadium where everyone is. And not too long after, he says, "For too long we've been forced to live in just this reality." He then calls reality tedious, poorly designed, and pathetically constructed. I can't describe exactly what element of his character this is, but saying things like this is exactly what he does, and it makes his character so much more entertaining. Now from here until the end of the movie, I wouldn't say there's any standout moments for Kaiba that define his character, so we'll be skipping over them for now. We're gonna skip to the scene where Kaiba diverts Aigami's attack towards himself, so that Yugi can continue dueling. And when Yugi asks him why he did it, he says, "For him, the Pharaoh." When you think about it, it's crazy how much influence the Pharaoh has had on Kaiba's life. It's also quite ironic that the one time the Pharaoh does return in this movie, Kaiba isn't there to see it, even though it's been his whole goal throughout this movie. But as we come to the end of the movie, we have what I think is one of the greatest scenes in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Throughout this video, I've mentioned that Kaiba is purely motivated by his desire to get revenge on the Pharaoh and reclaim his title as the King of Games. And at the end of this movie, he gets the chance to do that. He realized that if he can't bring the Pharaoh back, he has to go back to the Pharaoh. So he builds a time machine to go back to ancient Egypt and duel the Pharaoh. This is exactly the kind of ridiculous stuff that makes Kaiba such a great character. He is just so capable of doing the most ridiculous things that seem impossible until he just does them. A beautiful part of this sequence is that not a word is spoken. Kaiba arrives with all of his technology. The Pharaoh doesn't even bat an eyelid. He just stands up as if he knows exactly what's about to happen, gives a slight smile, and the duel is left ambiguous, which I feel is the perfect ending, as it's nice to see a conclusion to Kaiba's obsession after all this time. And that's how I believe Kaiba's character was perfected in Dark Side of Dimensions. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and if you enjoy this type of video, let me know in the comments and I'll make more like it.